Archie's Madhouse issue 20 has a comedy page about Hilda before Sabrina even showed up. Hilda looks like a mess, and that's not even mentioning her white hair. And it says that this happens to her every time she flies over that new sorcerer's domain. This is the 10th time he's knocked her out of the sky for no reason. She's tired of buying new clothes and brooms. Why would she do that instead of just zapping them up? She plans to go back and cast a great spell on him. I guess she was too scared to do that earlier. She checks the map and learns what the name of his domain is called. Cape Canaveral. Was that supposed to be a joke based on actual place? What was the joke? Was she wrong about thinking it was a sorcerer that knocked her off the broom? Was it a military? That joke was too esoteric. It could have been funnier if we saw what knocked her off the broom. How did she survive the first time? And in issue 21, Hilda talks to the audience and brags that she can change herself into a mouse or lion. Then she says she heard that remark. Somehow she thinks that the audience said she was a fake, even though she's clearly dressed like a witch in a monster-dedicated comic. What the audience actually would have remarked, if anything, is that she's bragging pointlessly for no reason. She doesn't disappear. She changed herself into this comic book I'm reading. I smiled a lot at that. That's actually pretty amusing. But I guess the best part that really made it funny is that there's no period at the end of her sentence. Sabrina's first ever story. This story is from Archie's Madhouse issue 22 from 1962. And it starts with Sabrina talking to the audience and introducing herself. And it's introducing the character in a stilted, lazy meta way because she talks to the audience. She says she hopes she didn't disappoint you. I can't help but feel disappointed because the art style isn't perfect. She doesn't look exactly like she does in the 70s comic, so she just looks uncanny. She hopes you didn't expect her to live on a dreary mountaintop making a nasty brew, which is self-aware writing lampshading out witches are usually imagined to be, and how she's not like that. Sabrina says that modern witches believe that life should be a ball. She says we modern witches, but in the 70s comics she barely meets any other witches who think like that, beyond her hippie cousins and their hippie friends. The new witch movement who believe in being nice to mortals. Here she talks as if she knows tons of witches like her, so they changed their mind about that later, making her feel alone, which is sad. We could have figured this out on our own after seeing a story with her. We didn't have to have her tell us that. Her very first display of magic is completely pointless. She breaks a glass. At least she does it in a creative way. She just looks at it with one of her eyes closed. You'd expect her to point at it. Out of nowhere, she says that modern witches still have familiars, impish animals that help perform small malicious errands. She's usually not malicious though, and the series after this point has never said that witches need familiars. So this is early installment weirdness, but at least it has Salem as a concept from the very beginning, and really justifies why he's here. It's using an old, outdated perception of witches by giving them familiars, but at least it feels new since I've never seen witches use them in the media nowadays, whether it's Wendy Witchcart or Cackletta. It feels more like she's a witch this way. But they don't use familiars in the media because that would be having an extra character. Sabrina confuses me when she's happy that Salem got a gold star yesterday for tearing up the neighbor's petunias. This tries to portray Sabrina as evil, because it's not explaining that she zapped up new petunias. Did they not decide on her character yet? They thought that her living a modern lifestyle was subversive enough? Nowadays, she'd just be mad at Salem and yell at him for it. Out of nowhere, Sabrina says that one of the ways you can spot a witch is that they can't cry. That gets dropped later on too, of course. Making a character cry is a way to make them more sympathetic, when it's justified anyways. It's not like the idea of there being ways that you can spot a witch is doomed by itself to be stupid. In the sitcom, Sabrina was able to find out someone was a witch or not by drinking herself and seeing if one of their nose hairs would curl or not. I could believe that the amount of magic in them was what caused the differences. But not being able to cry makes no sense. That implied they're all sociopaths or no tear ducts despite looking human. Why would having magic get rid of your tear ducts? Finally, she shows some relatability when she says she hates TV commercials. I guess you can't use magic to fast forward past the commercials. To be fair, how are you supposed to visualize that? You won't know what's coming up next, imagine. But if they can't visualize it, isn't that what saying spells is for? Anyways, another peculiar trait witches have, apparently, is that they can't sink in the water. That was also dropped later on. Definitely in the 90s comic. I didn't expect her first story to be so silly. You'd think they'd use magic to sink in the water anyways. Why would she be dumb enough to think that her ridiculous lie would keep people from thinking she's magical? Oh, she didn't sink because she's just that pure. Come on. Somehow that actually worked. Well, witches are established to be able to cast love spells. And we see Sabrina happily do so with no moral quandary about it. Witches aren't allowed to fall in love themselves. That was also dropped. Sabrina gets Harvey as a boyfriend later, and the ants get boy crazy a lot. It makes sense that that was dropped, because why make the characters less relatable and decrease the amount of stories you're able to tell? Apparently, being in love would make the head witches angry. Why? And she won't even explain that. If they weren't allowed to fall in love, the witch species would go extinct from nobody having children naturally. It'd be more trouble than it'd be worth to have to only keep making new witches by artificial means. So we see Cupid unable to make Sabrina fall in love. I'd like to see an actual story, please, and not just a bunch of outdated, abandoned lore. I'm getting nothing out of this. Like in the 70s comic, the head witch is called Della and looks like she should. One of her routine hexing jobs was inventing the twist, a dance that hurts people sometimes because she's spiteful for no explained reason. Della's assigned Sabrina to hex the students at high school. That's certainly different. In the 70s comic, she just goes to high school for normal reasons, and Della thinks she's too nice. That was actually relatable. Or is that actually the high school she regularly goes to? She gets a lot of opportunities to do hexing as a cheerleader by making the football players fumble the ball. It's a very subtle way to do what she's been told, which is clever. This kind of thing might have happened anyways. She's happy when she says that sometimes she works against her own school's football team just to break up the monotony. Again, that's not who Sabrina is. I prefer it if she just did it against the other school's football team, but even that's bad. It's cheating. I guess if she just stuck to hexing people who deserved it, she wouldn't be doing it enough. We see that she made random students unable to think of an answer to an exam, and she has a part-time job at a local soda shop. So much for relatability there, because she spikes the soda with love potions. At least it makes two people happy, but still, it's fake happiness. Everywhere she goes, the boys go wild over her. But apparently, if she fell in love, she'd lose her powers. And at first, she says that'd be bad, but then she doubts it. What do they want with this character then? You'd think witches would drink a potion so that's impossible for them to fall in love. You'd think that would be enchanted away from them, if it's considered a problem. At least explain that Della had a really bad breakup and that's why she made that rule. How is this entertaining to see? A series needs to have at least some likable protagonists, and they need to experience more than just unfair misery. At least issue 24 does an actual story. Surprisingly, the very start of Archie's Madhouse issue 22 has Hilda show up in the table of contents page. Hilda was the first Sabrina character. She asked the audience if we've seen a new TV show about diving witches as a lame joke, as she flies underwater with goggles. I like that she has goggles on because it makes sense. But why is it in black and white? The story after that isn't in black and white. And she's also the first Sabrina character to appear in an off-panel of sorts. Some mortals hear people arguing and fighting in their house outside, and a woman casually calls Hilda and Eva two old witches. I guess she's just calling them that as an insult because they're old ladies who dress like witches. Because of course, they'd go after them an angry mob if they knew they were witches, or be scared of them. Is Eva the prototype name for Zelda, or is she her cousin? And both of them have white hair instead of a distinctive, memorable design. It turns out all they're doing is putting pins on voodoo dolls. But since they're witches, that would hurt them. But you'd think one of them would just use magic to make the other get rid of the voodoo doll and brainwash her into not wanting to use it against her anymore.